Levinsky was the real name. Was Levinsky. You know something? I don't even remember the father's first name anymore. I'm ashamed of myself. What the heck was the father's name? Okay. Where did these people come from? Danny Rubenstein, being Howie Leese's cousin. Howie Leese studied clarinet with Schlemke Beckerman. So Howie Leese was also Danny Rubenstein's first teacher. So, for Schlemke, Sidney was, also, and two directly to Howie, and Howie to Danny. So they learned from the same people. Now, Danny was a member of that first generation American also, so was Howie. They were born in this country, but they were members of Max Epstein's generation. But Max Epstein had a big hand in introducing some of his generation, the younger ones of his generation, to this music. And he said, okay, listen to this guy, listen to that guy, listen to the other guy. And they picked up on the job the way I did. I was the last generation to learn on the job was me. I'm very lucky that way. Marilyn.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, you were talking about some jazz musicians. What about the other way? Did a lot of jazz musicians play some of these club dates?
Good question. There was a trumpet player from Philadelphia called Red Rodney. He later played with Charlie Parker, but he started out as a club date musician. And then we come to Sammy Musiker. Now, Sam Musiker was the featured clarinet soloist in the Gene Krupa Band from 1938, late 38, until 1942 when he was taken into the Army. And he was a jazz player. Artie Shaw, I think, may have had a little experience playing some of this kind of music as well. Because there is a record around of Artie Shaw playing some quotes from Jewish things. The thing is called a chant. It was a broadcast recording. And Shaw had a little experience like that. Now, Benny Goodman, whatever it was, forgot on purpose. He didn't want to know from it. Yeah, he said, he didn't want to be, hey, listen, he ended up marrying a Vanderbilt. Artie Shaw married everything else. Including Gabriel Gardner. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question about harmonization.
Yes.
You're playing piano for old school players.
Yes.
Where do you get into a harmonic like this? How elaborate how many second chords and that kind of thing?
Well, I'll tell you what happened in this country when those guys came here. If you listen to Dave Terrace's early records, on a couple of them, you hear a pianist who obviously has some classical training. And he is doing this kind of thing, and Dave I actually liked it. So it became okay to do that. Now, we have a trumpet player called Ken Gross. Very good trumpet player. I used him on the Klezmer Plus recording. And you had in Ken Gross a musician who had come from a musical family. His brother is a rather well-known Broadway arranger, Arnold. And his father was a really fine pianist who taught in the schools. Now, Irving, Ken's father, had played with Naftula. Yeah, played piano with Naftula. And I said, what was it like? He said, it was a baptism by fire. And I answered him, a baptism by fire water. Naftula had a reputation of being a Ganesha shit. Yes?
Yeah, I'm interested in your Hasidic gigs.
Yes.
Because now a lot of the Hasidic customers, they do the one-man band thing with the synthesizer. What kind of things should they ask for? Did you just pull out the book?
When I started in the Hasidic business in 1964, I went to work for a couple of young guys. One was Cy Kushner, the accordionist, very good accordion player. He had a group called the Mark III. Now these were yeshiva guys who had studied, they got their own bands together and they were playing a repertoire of newish Hasidic-oriented, but not completely Hasidic tunes. I learned from them, and after them, I got to know Rudy Capel. Rudy Capel was a clarinet and saxophone player who played a lot of Hasidic jobs back in the day. And I worked with him, but my main teachers on the Hasidic were the Epsteins, because at that time they were one of the going bands at the time. I also played with Joe King, who was the first Hasidic band leader in on the New York scene back in the 40s. The first clarinet players were Rudy and Howie Leese, who played that kind of music. And they learned it from Joe King, who was a really very mediocre accordion and piano player. But Joe was he was a religious man, and he taught the musicians to learn the song on the job. So the Hasidic business became, the band was actually, the people who worked the Hasidic business were klezmer players, the first ones, because they were the only ones who knew the basic style. And they, instead of playing the klezmer, Freilich, and Bulgars, they played the Hasidic tunes, which were much simpler. Examples. Played before Maxie Epstein. The Hasidic tunes. Tzavei, 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 Yeshua, Tzavei, 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 Yeshua, tzavei, tzavei. The Hasidic stuff was much more simple. And if it didn't have words, we used to sing Old Man River, that old man was called Agansio Freilas, Agansio Freilas. Like that what you say, Old Man River, Old Man River, that old man river. This is telling you little secrets from inside. These are the things that we did. A lot of us made cheshik of that stuff, because after when you play it every night, after a while, you get shitty from all this stuff. The one-man band situation came up because people the bands were getting more expensive, and people didn't want. We have one guy over here in the audience, Zevi Zions, who does one-man band thing, but his real thing is the accordion. Right, Zevi? Used to. You don't do the one-man band anymore? The instruments they play are called play it yourself. What these people are not musicians, they're programmers. And they learn how to program. And everything they can play on the white keys. It's very simple. And they also, they push the buttons and the sounds come out. And you don't have to know anything about music.
I never read the translation.
This one is a musician, because he's studying with Charlie Nunzio. He's a musician. Yes?
I just wanted to ask a question about what it was like to be working when the music business was coming. How often, how many gigs would you play in a month, for example? What would it look like?
I played as many jobs as 42 in 1 month. I kid you not. I was doing luncheons, senior citizen nursing homes. I was doing Hasidic jobs at night. And in those days, I used to work on Shabbos. That stopped. But I used to work the American jobs on the weekends and the Hasidic jobs during the week. And I became one of the busiest guys. The Sokol don't even bother calling him. You'll never get him. I was one of the busiest guys in the line. My biggest year, 1981, I did 430 jobs. And I'm still here to tell the story. At this point in my life, if I did 430 jobs in 5 years, it would be a lot. And I don't even approach it. Yes?
Not so much a question, but a statement.
Yeah.
I think you keep saying that you were the lucky one in all this. Actually, I think we're the lucky ones because of how you dedicated yourself. Pete, you had an incredible collection of unique skills, both being a reed player, but you didn't mention that you willed yourself into existence as a keyboard player in order to provide a really top quality accompaniment for all of these great players. And by doing that, you internalized both the melody and the harmony. Also, the fact that you were a school teacher and you had a real passion for teaching. So at the moment that the klezmer revival was in its real nascent state, you brought all of the necessary skills that were needed in order to create a community where you were the gateway between how it was done, because you're right, no one was learning on the bandstand anymore. You created a hothouse environment by bringing all of the classic players, Sid Beckerman and Maxie Epstein, and you. Yeah, I mean, it's everyone. I mean, it was only because of you and your knowledge, because you were the one great contribution I made to the klezmer scene was dubbing you the youngest of the old guys. And by being the caboose on that train and by being the gateway and your willingness to teach the music as you learned it, you gave everyone here, this scene, it could not have happened if you weren't willing to do what you did, if you didn't do it as well as you did, and so selflessly by creating a literate gateway and a platform